Welcome to the Somatic Coaching Academy podcast with Ani and Brian. Join us as we explore the art and science of trauma-sensitive somatic practices and tools to strengthen your practice as a coach, therapist, or holistic professional. Master the art of motivating even the most challenging clients when you'll understand how to tap into and unlock your client's complete holistic intelligence. If you want to learn the most cutting-edge, research-supported skills for personal and professional mastery, you've come to the right place. Let's get this conversation started.
Hi, and welcome to the Somatic Coaching Academy podcast. I'm Brian Trzaskos.
And I'm Ani Anderson. We're the co-founders of the Somatic Coaching Academy, your place for understanding and embodying complete human intelligence. Hey, Brian, before we get started on episode number 5 here, I just want to say that a lot of people who contact us about the certification programs, they're like, how do I get started with somatic coaching? Like they just want kind of all in. And if that's you, if you've been listening and following and your interest is piqued, I encourage you, have a conversation with our team. Our team is, made up of graduates. They can share not only about the certification program, but about their experience. And people love to talk to our team about the certification program. So if you've been thinking about it, give our team a call. Okay, so let's get into episode number 5 here, Brian.
Yeah, so episode number 5, we are talking about, are you feeling called to somatics for your next level of personal growth?
A lot of people tell us this when they not just some, like most people tell us when we talk on the phone with them and they're interested in our certification programs that they feel called to the work. It feels like a deep calling, or they say things like, I've been praying for a solution. I've been really looking for an answer. We even have people tell us, Brian, I don't know why I'm calling you. I just feel compelled, like those kinds of things. Which is always fun.
Yeah.
Well, let's see why you're calling us.
So why are you calling? And so Ani, can we talk a little bit about our own kind of personal callings to somatics?
Yeah, absolutely.
Would that make sense for today?
I think it happens quite frequently as a calling, Brian. So what was it for you? What was the call?
Yeah, well, I think, first of all, before we jump into that, I think for me, it was, there's 2 levels here. Like one, it was kind of a personal calling to somatics for my own personal growth. And then there was a professional calling, if you will. Like, how do I use somatics in my own life to heal my own life? And then how do I use somatics to help other people in their personal growth journey? And so for me, it's kind of been those 2 parts.
Well, I think that really reflects what our students say. People ask us sometimes, they're like, well, is your academy for personal growth or is it for professional growth? I'm like, well, how
do you separate the 2 of those things, really?
And it's both. I mean, people come to us 100% of the time really looking for their own personal growth that they can then share things with other people too. It happens. It's all the time. So that happened. So it was kind of a 2-step process for you?
Yeah, 2-step process. And I think the first step started when I was 14 years old, actually. So when I was 14 years old, my paternal grandmother died of cancer. And it was really emotionally devastating for me in so many ways. She was probably the closest person to me in my life at that time. And the whole kind of way that she ended up passing away was it was really horrific for me in a lot of ways. I mean, those days, cancer, there wasn't like a palliative care. It was basically like, let's just give a person as much chemotherapy as maybe they can tolerate and see who wins. Does the cancer stay alive longer? Is who dies first, the cancer or the person, sort of thing. And I remember seeing her the night that she died, basically, and she didn't know anyone. She was just totally, in so much pain, suffering so terribly. She didn't know who I was. And to not have that kind of closure, to be able to say goodbye to her, just really crippled me in a lot of ways emotionally. And so very soon after she passed away, I developed really some terrible, terrible back pain. And I didn't realize at the time, I didn't know at the time, why would I connect those 2 things? And nobody around me connected those 2 things either. But I knew I had this back pain that actually I had for about 27 years chronically, and really terrible episodes of back pain. I'd end up not being able to get off the toilet by myself, and be laid out on the couch for a couple of weeks. And I was still a pretty active person. So there was this really weird contradiction between how I was active as a person, but I still get laid out with these episodes of really, horrible back stuff that would go on for me too. And I did, as I went on, did start to make connections between my back pain episodes and things like being frustrated
Mm.
or angry or not expressing my anger. And I had episodes of depression, and those kinds of things would happen too a lot. And so I was starting to make connections, but I still wasn't putting all those pieces together. But I was definitely drawn towards it. I knew I and I tell you, the other part that kind of flipped that for me on is when I was working as a very young physical therapist at a world-renowned medical center called Craig Hospital, where we specialized in helping people who had brain injury, traumatic brain injuries, or traumatic spinal cord injuries heal. And so I noticed as we were working with people that not all the patients that were in that hospital healed the same way or at the same rate or in the same times. And really, a lot of times, regardless of what their diagnosis was, some people with really horrible diagnoses and prognosis actually healed better and had better outcomes than people with better prognosis. And it was something kind of like, for me, it didn't make sense. I started asking myself, why do some people heal and other people don't heal? And when I started asking that question and looking at myself around why was I not healing from my back pain, I started to really understand more definitively kind of that body mind connection. And so I was kind of on this arc of being introduced to somatics, well, with suffering with chronic back pain, depression, frustration, anger, a whole series of relationship problems, in and out of relationship stuff. Like, it wasn't really like a pretty life, I think, in a lot of ways for me early on, but I was still kind of drawn to this idea of the body mind connection. And that kind of started my arc, or my personal interest
Mhm.
in somatics for me. How about you, Ani?
Well, it's interesting. You were 14. You
Yeah.
said, yeah, mine was when I was 19. I was a junior in
Hmm.
college. And I had some abnormal bleeding, and I went to the health center. And at that time, I didn't have a good relationship with my parents. I, in fact, didn't like necessarily have a place to go home to during college. So I was kind of managing this on my own and relying on the health center to help me. It's
Hmm.
not like I had my parents to talk to. So I went to the health center and I saw a nurse, and she said, "It's probably cancer."
Hmm. Wow.
And like, it wasn't. Like, what a terrible thing to say to a
19-year old,
-year-old,
yeah, who's
right?
all alone at school.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's probably cancer because this doesn't happen to people your age. So she sent me to the doctor. I went to the doctor. They ran some tests, could not figure out what was up, ran some more tests, could not figure out what was up. At this time, I was getting scared, frustrated, and I felt very alone, of course. My mom had sent me to college with Carolyn Mace's book, Anatomy of the Spirit, and I had it on my bookshelf. I hadn't looked at it, by the way, but I was, I don't know, I guess feeling a little despondent, I guess. Like, I just didn't know
Hmm.
what to do. I don't know that I was looking for answers, but that actually was like the calling to me. It was
Mhm.
like that book kept standing out on my bookshelf. It wasn't like I was searching. It was like,
Mm.
"Psst, hey,
Yeah.
pick me up." So I read the book, and it was talking about the energy centers in the body, and this was not a conversation I had heard anybody else having in
Mm.
my life. If any of that would have been like, that's weird.
Mhm. Yeah.
So she asked very specific questions based on certain body areas
Mhm.
that you could kind of contemplate and think about. And so one of the questions that came up was about family
Mhm.
issues. Do you have certain family issues that need to be resolved? And I did actually.
Mm.
I had a very significant, difficult conversation that I had to have with my mother that I was not having. I was avoiding at all costs. So at the urging of the book and the promise that could something really
Yeah, yeah.
change, I was brave enough to have the difficult
Mm.
conversation with my mom, and my symptoms changed. They just went away.
Amazing.
They went away.
Mm.
And I went back to the doctor, and I was pissed, by the way.
Yeah, right. Mm.
I went back to the doctor, and he's like, "We should do more tests." And I'm like, "My symptoms went away, and I don't ever want to see you
Again,
again.
yeah.
Screw you, buddy." So
Mm.
I didn't have to do anything else with that. And I was like, whatever that was, I want to know more about it. And
Mhm.
whatever that was, I want to be able to bring it to more people, because More people need to know about this. Whatever that was like really magical.
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm sure a lot of the people that come into our academy and the people we talk to, our private clients and those types of things, a lot of them have stories like that. I
Yeah.
think that they were called, that's why we're in a relationship with them. Most of the time, if people didn't have some calling to somatics, they're probably not going to be in our like in our orbit, and we're
Well,
not going to be in their orbit necessarily, right?
yeah.
If people just think, oh, it's an intellectual thing, and I'm not interested in what happens to the body, we're not really in association with them that
Well,
much.
we do have people who contact us who are like, hey, somatics, heard about it,
Yeah.
think it's cool. Maybe I'd like to learn. Most of the people who talk to us have some kind of thing that they've gone through and they want to be able to make a bigger impact in other
Mhm.
people's lives. Whether or not they had a positive result from
Right.
what happened with them, because sometimes it just didn't go well and they know it could have gone better, or it went amazingly for them and they want to be able to help people
Mm.
too. And so a distinction that people make too, Brian, just to take a little side trip here, is some people are trying to decide whether or not they want to learn about somatic therapy
Mhm.
or somatic coaching. And obviously, the people who want to do somatic coaching are the people who study with us. But that's a really fantastic conversation to have with our
Yeah.
team
Yep.
if you're trying to figure out for you what's best, because it's very different. So, and we'll talk about that on another episode.
Yeah. Yeah. So this whole idea of being kind of called to somatics. So I was personally called to somatics. Ani was personally called to somatics, was doing a lot of my own work and study and reading and all those kinds of things. And I'm sure you were doing your own study and reading and working with people and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, especially after that, I just wanted to know as much as I
As you
possibly
could
could. So I
about it,
started
right?
to digest all kinds of
Yeah.
books.
Yeah. And I think that, as I got to a certain point in my own personal development, I didn't have everything solved, by the way. And I would have to say, I still don't have everything solved because there's so much, there's so much mystery here to still be unraveled. Like I don't ever think we'll know all of it. But I got to a point where I knew enough, where I was like, I really want to start doing this with other people.
Yeah.
And so I remember when I left my job at Craig Hospital, where there was a lot of integrative focus, where we spent, I mean, as a physical therapist, it's like the top of the heap. There's like nowhere to go after that in a lot of ways, because you're working integrated.
best of the
You're
best.
integrating with occupational therapy and rec therapy and nursing and neuropsychology and social services. And we're all working together, and speech therapy, all working together to really help someone heal holistically in an integrative model. And so I was under the illusion that everywhere did that, And so I left the Garden of Eden of Craig Hospital and found myself in, for-profit outpatient care. And the first day I walked into that office, I was given a list of 20 patients to see that day. And I was like, what?
Yeah, what? Yeah.
And so,
I had a similar experience.
And as soon as the rubber met the road on that, I started thinking, oh, no way. Like I cannot do this.
Yeah.
And I started having this longing to bring more. There was like no body mind at all. It was just body. I was just saying body after 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 body.
By the way, body parts.
Yeah, body parts. Exactly. Yeah.
They have something else going on.
Right. Yeah.
You
They
can't
come
do
in with
anything
somebody
about
comes in with
that.
knee pain. And I'm like, it's actually their lumbar spine, but I can't treat their lumbar spine because they have knee pain.
It's so frustrating.
Right. It's so terribly frustrating inside of the Western medical system. One of those things. So I was not able to see people holistically just because of the time demands I was under.
Yeah.
And that was incredibly disheartening for me. And so, but I'm still studying, right? So I had a half an hour trip back and forth to work every day. And so on that half an hour trip, I'm listening to, I don't think there were podcasts at that time. I don't think that was a thing. That's how long ago this was. I was listening to
like
tapes.
right?
I'm listening to tapes, and I'm listening to Deepak Chopra tapes, and any physiology I can get my hands on, I'm listening to body, mind, physiology. So I'm listening to tapes. Maybe there's some CDs out, something like that. And again, I'm memorizing the depth of the epigenetics and all these things, right? I'm really getting into this. And I'm like, but I can't apply it anywhere with my patients. But every day I'm listening to it and I'm visualizing starting my own holistic practice, my own holistic wellness center. And, I visualized that every day on the way to work and every day on the way home from work for 7 years. For 7 years.
That's a long time. Aren't visualizations supposed to just make things happen?
Yeah, right. Is it just like supposed to happen? Like I'm like
What's the matter with
I'm
you?
like I have this calling. Like I have this calling, and you have a great phrase. Like when the universe calls,
pick up the phone.
You got to actually pick up the phone.
Well, you have to actually do something is the thing. When the
Mhm.
universe calls, you actually have to do something. And so, similarly for me, I was like meditating, waiting for buckets of money to land in the mailbox,
Mm.
fly, carrier pigeon. I don't know.
Right,
Like,
owl, whatever.
yeah, right. Like I can remember the times I would like meditate and visualize and what are they called? The
Vision board.
vision
right?
board
Yeah.
stuff and affirmations, which is all great and awesome and was a part of my process. But it wasn't until I started picking up the phone,
yeah.
do something, that things started to really change.
Yeah. So what's that kind of look like? Like, what does it look like to actually pick up the phone?
Mhm.
Right. So for me, and we talked about this on a previous podcast, when I decided to leave my hospital job, was when I was seeing so many people there that I realized, oh my God, I can actually maybe do this on my own. Now, the way I wanted to do
Yeah.
it on my own was I wanted to have a private pay, non-insurance practice.
Private
Like
pay, private
private
practice.
pay, private practice. Like I was not going to bill insurance. And people said, you are crazy, Brian. Like no one is going to pay you to come for physical therapy to see you when they go down the street and have their insurance company pay for it. And I said, maybe, but the calling at that point had become so intense for me. And I could tell because I would get so angry every time I walked into work. And I wasn't angry with the people I worked with. Actually, the people I worked with are really nice.
Me too.
But I was angry every day. Every day. And then finally they put in this biometric time clocks. I had to like put my finger on it to punch in and punch out. And I was like, that was broke the camel's
Last
back. And I was
straw.
like, no freaking way.
I'm not
I
punching
can't
the
do it
clock.
anymore. And that's when I finally picked up the phone and I decided I'm going to start my own practice.
Mhm.
Start my own practice. And I figured out how much money I needed every week, private clients, to match my income that I had from the hospital. I figured that out. I knew what my minimum was. I remodeled a room in my basement of my house, and I basically left my comfortable, safe, go to work 9 to 5 every day hospital job to pick up the phone with the universe been calling me for years to start my own
Do something.
practice that was focused on holistic care, which meant that I was going to spend an hour with every single client, not 12 minutes that I had when I was in the hospital, an hour. Everyone's going to get, and I committed to that. I organized my whole payment structure around it and knew how many people I had to see. I jumped into the deep end of the pool, and the universe caught me. And I think one of the things that we talk about a lot when we talk about natural laws at the Somatic Coaching Academy, and I'm curious what your experience is with this too, Ani, your personal experience when you kind of made that leap too, is that whenever we have a desire for something, like a very clear idea, for me, it was just to open up a holistic wellness center, which we ended up doing together. The first one that we both opened was together. So that's kind of a cool segue in the story.
That was actual call too.
Yeah, it was a cool too. Yeah, call, exactly. But when you have a vision that's very clear, that in part of that vision, already included in that vision are the ways and the means to make it happen. Like the ways and the means are just waiting for you, but they show up after you make the decision, not before.
You can't see them beforehand.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can't see them beforehand. Yeah, I was thinking about for myself when I started my private pay, private practice. I knew I was an occupational therapist working in the system. I wanted to be working in pediatrics because similar to you with Craig, I had done an internship at the Denver Children's Hospital when I was in college, and it was awesome. And I thought everybody did pediatrics. And I thought everybody did pediatrics like them.
Yeah.
Turns out not everybody did pediatrics, and no one was doing treatments like them in my area, like not even close.
Right.
And so there's that frustration piece, right? I was like, I gotta now dumb myself down. This stinks. So I ended up working in outpatients and long-term care and skilled nursing facilities, and I was not a happy camper. So I knew I had skills in pediatrics that other people didn't have. I was an occupational therapist and I'd been learning craniosacral therapy. And so I was dreaming of getting out of my day job, and I started seeing some clients on the side. But the calling was, I was pretty sure in the area that I was, that I couldn't just hang up a flyer and people would come to me, because there were already 2 people in the area who were really good with craniosacral therapy, and everybody went to them.
Yeah.
So, but I had this, my job was just crushing my soul, right? So I called one of them and I said, "Hey, I specialize in pediatrics. Do you see kids?" And she said, "No,
Mm,
I'd love somebody to send kids to."
wow.
And like there it was, but this calling was this niggling, like, I've got to get out of here. I've got to get out of here. And I was really called to work with kids. And I just couldn't find anywhere in my area where I could get a job. I
Mm,
even had my employer at the time kept promising me that they would put me in a pediatric place. And they just kept like dangling the carrot and never, it was never,
mm.
but I really, really felt called to work with kids.
Yeah. Yeah. So was that for you kind of like the decision point for you to follow that calling? Was that you really want to work with kids and they kept promising you, but
It
it
was
didn't
the
happen? And
mounting frustration,
yeah, yeah.
you know? I just couldn't take it anymore.
Yeah. And actually that's a really interesting point too, Ani. Do you think that your when you were 19 years old and the experience you had there being your personal call to somatics,
Yeah.
do you think on some level you knew that the mounting frustration that you were experiencing may result in some type of somatic or body oriented problem that you didn't want to experience? I mean, were you making that connection at that
No,
time?
but I think when I hear you say that, what I think is, people ask us all the time, how do you put the body mind back together? And we say, well, we come from a perspective that the body mind split never
Mm,
happened. And when you come from a place of that perspective, that the body mind split never happened, then you come from a position of body, mind, and spirit are all this holistic way of looking at an individual. And I think that calling, this longing, this yearning really comes like a spiritual kind of nature. It has like this spiritual element of it, but you can't grasp spirit, but you can tangibly feel the body. And I think
mhm,
it's this interesting holistic interplay of spirit being able to become tangible to
yeah.
us,
Yep.
right? And so it is those moments when through the body we can feel our spiritual nature, that it becomes so strong and compelling.
Mm,
And that's what one of the reasons why I think a lot of people say that they're called to somatics
yeah.
in whatever way, because it is this really interesting moment in our personal growth where it's a major light bulb moment where we understand that the body and the mind and the spirit cannot be separated, that we must look at them together.
Yeah.
And it becomes this really fascinating, just enlivening experience.
Yeah, that kind of segues for me, Ani, into something that I think a belief that some people who think about working with us at the Somatic Coaching Academy come up against, but then maybe don't move through, is that there's a belief that I have to go through my own personal growth before I can help somebody else. Like I need to know
Fix myself.
exactly how somatics work for me rather than do for somebody else. And I want to debunk that for just a second, because me and my personal experience, I actually didn't, I would say, heal my that chronic back pain stuff until I decided to start helping other people. And I don't
100%.
think I ever would have gotten there until I was moved, impelled forward into that decision to help other people. Because one of the other things that impelled me forward was actually another somatic crisis that I had around a massive stress crisis experience where I was having all these somatic symptoms, like really very, very high blood pressure, acid reflux, all types of frustration. In a lot of ways, that core thing that started happening when I was 14 years old kind of was my back issue, was just kind of a piece of that. But then when I was in my early 40s, that kind of just all blew up in a whole other health crisis. And that blowing up that whole other health crisis for me really made me, like, it was a wake up call for me that I needed to kind of decide what I was going to do, like kind of like get off the pot. Pardon my phraseology around that, but I was really like, I've got to do this now. Like, this isn't going to go away unless I answer the call. There's a little saying we have: sometimes the universe whispers at you until it has to hit you with a 2x4, you know?
Yeah.
And so I'm like, I'm one that's been hit by a 2x4 a couple of times because I didn't listen to the whispers of the
Well,
universe.
and you don't know how until
Yeah.
you get hit by a few two by
Right.
fours.
Yeah.
I think it's a major personal growth moment
Yeah.
too, right? To really start to work work back from the 2x4 into the nuances.
Yep.
For sure. For
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah. Yeah. So the hot tip from this podcast basically is, on your personal growth journey, when the universe calls, giving you whispers, pick up the phone, take action. The ways and the means to support you will show up after your decision, not before. That's the way that the universe works.
Yeah, and you're going to be able to understand so much more about your spiritual nature and your emotions and your mind and your body when you do that. And Brian, I hate to be cheesy, but I can't help it. If you've been if you've been thinking about calling us, pick up the phone.
Yeah.
Give us a call, talk to our team, because we'll be able to help you discern, whether or not the Somatic Coaching Academy is the right next step for you. So give us a call, and we'll see you next time. Thanks so much for joining us. If you like this episode, make sure to subscribe, leave us a review. We really appreciate you being a part of this wonderful community. We'll see you next time.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to this episode. We hope that this conversation will help you improve your practice and change the way you think about your work, your clients, and yourself. Continue your exploration of trauma-sensitive somatic coaching by listening to more podcast episodes at somaticcoachingacademy.com. You could be the trusted guide that people turn to help them with their most challenging situations and to reach their most precious goals. Thank you for joining us. We'll see you next time.